Good morning. I thought I'd get on with Holy Wisdom, Holy Word for a few minutes. We've got the green show at 11. So I hope you come on. We've got an amazing friend. This will be a different show, the Green Home we're in, every weekend. We've been going at 11 o'clock, but because summer and summertime, we're going to change it up. So Green Home Marin will be on at 11 today. But next week it'll be on at 9 a.m. So I'm going to get on here today because I just graduated yesterday. And I wanted to share a little bit about what I'm feeling today, about the presence of, God in my life, and the presence of my family, and the presence of how Holy Wisdom, Holy Word plays a part in my life every day. And I'm thinking a lot about my Celtic tradition because Pentecost is coming, Pentecost Sunday, and it's when the light came from the heavens, and it brought forth this amazing understanding that the Holy Spirit is within each of us. And I have a experience that I want to share with you that happened on the island of Iona. And I arrived there a day before Pentecost. I think it was probably a Saturday that I arrived. And I don't know if any of you know the island of Iona. It's on the west coast of Scotland. And it's one of the most sacred places. If anything, for my graduation present, I would go to the island of Iona. So I thought today I'll go there as a gift to myself and spend the day there in my psyche, because Scotland is the home of my ancestors. And it's Memorial Day weekend. And when we think about ancestry, we think about the ancestors of who we've come from and how we've come and what we are. We physicalized from our ancestry, And so some of the deeper wisdom that came out of my trip to Scotland was staying at Findhorn. And the trip to Iona was a gift to be able to spend some time on the Celtic island. And my grandmother is Cunningham. Her last name is Cunningham. And it was on my father's side of the tradition. But I felt tremendously blessed to be at Findhorn. Findhorn brings about many years of connection through Findhorn, and the angel cards came from Findhorn. So do you guys, I don't know if you know the angel cards. It's a pretty cool tradition of Eileen Caddy, and I'm not sure who created it, but there's some really cool things that can happen around the Celtic tradition and old cultures and old understanding. But this kind of brought me up to the present day. And I got there and we got to do the transformation game. And the transformation game was all based on an amazing game. And someday I want to do it. I want to play for 4 hours online and just do this like amazing connection with 4 people. So if any of you want to do this with me and just spend a day or evening, it'll be really fun. I want to put a shout out to prayers for people that died in the crash in Pakistan from the plane crash, and all people that have passed. We've had a lot of death. And I think this is the time to call in the angels, to call in the wisdom of the angels, and to call in the grace. So in many cultures, the oracles were important, and I call on the oracles a lot. I don't share that much, but whether it's the biblical text, or it's angel cards, or it's Celtic cards, it may be all kinds of different oracles. I'm very traditional in my heart to know that all traditions carry wisdom. And all carry this word, the sacred word. And so I'm going to read a little bit out of the Celtic tradition today. and I think it might be helpful. And I'm going to read from let me think what I want to do here. Yeah, this is John Philip Newell, and he's a pastor from Edinburgh, and he came here to our school, and he runs a foundation, very precious to me. And he writes, the Celtic tradition wants to say that at heart, we are princes and princesses of beauty. He gets into some of these old revering ideas of the essential qualities. The Celtic tradition sees sin as the soul's forgetfulness of itself. But it's an infection deep within us. He calls it the leprosy of the soul. And as people from Islam finishing up Ramadan, there's such a precious gift of emptying ourselves through Ramadan. And I really feel like Ramadan this year was about emptying myself, and also, finishing this degree was kind of like my Ramadan. And in the Celtic tradition, there's this place of stepping in to the sacred through sound and through movement. The infection distorts the beauty of the image of God, he says. Like he's talking about our internal ideas of what we believe, and it distorts us from this idea of relationship to self, a relationship to the presence of God. He talks about an old Celtic tradition. Eurygena is a kind of a old understanding writer. And let's just read it. Eurygena says, for in itself evil is a deformity and an abhorrent ugliness, which if the erring sense beheld undisguised, it would not only refuse to follow or take delight in, but would flee from the arbor. But the unwitting sense errs, and in erring is deceived, because it takes the evil for something which is good and fair to look upon, the pleasant to taste. Our failings and inhumanities to one another are not manifestations of what human nature produces. Rather, they represent a perversion of our nature using the good in the wrong way, as Eurygena says. How it is, then, that we are restored to true selves. Eurygena speaks of the medicine of the divine grace, which will restore our soul's memory and heal our deep infection. As the skin of the human body is smitten by the ugly contagion of leprosy, so human nature is infected and becomes unlike its creator. But when by the medicine of the divine grace, it shall be cured of that leprosy, then shall it be restored to its former beauty. What is more in itself, the nature was created in the image of God, never did lose the bloom of its beauty, nor the integrity of its essence, nor could it do so, for the divine form itself ever remains immutable. I really deepen this conversation because I think so many people go towards spirituality because there's this sense of the idea of the Christian tradition that people looked at sin as such a negative. And when I went to the Franciscan school of theology, there was such a deep witness of understanding this internal stirring what that reading was just saying about there's a change in us all the time. We change within ourselves all the time. We change from that deep character building of grace. And grace happens whether we like it or not. And it's been beautiful in my life. And I think if I look at grace and how it's transformed me in my own personal stirrings of change needed, there's always this witness of love that comes back. I'm going to point to John Donahue now. He wrote the book Beauty, the sources of compassion, serenity, and hope. And in this time of COVID, and our town just kind of opened up yesterday, and I just thought I'd open up to John Donahue. He says, the gifts of imagination brings. He said, the imagination is like a lantern. It illuminates the inner landscapes of our life and helps us discover their secret archaeologies. When our eyes are graced with wonder, the world reveals its wonder to us. There are people who see only dullness in the world, and that is because their eyes have already been dulled. So much depends on how we look at things. The quality of our looking determines what we come to see. Too often we squander the invitations extended to us because our looking has become repetitive and blind. The mystery and beauty is all around us, but we never manage to see it. Similarly, with the inner world, the imagination is the eye for the inner world. When the imagination awakens, the inner world illuminates. When our imagination awakens, the inner world illuminates. We begin to glimpse things that no one speaks about, that outer world seems to ignore. When the inner world brightens, we discover a new confidence and surer grounding in the world. You know, I've worked with many cancer patients, and a friend of mine was diagnosed not too long ago. And what I see in the disparities of cancer or illness or disease, or, you know, I'm a nurse. And so when I look at the imagination, the people that heal can imagine themselves well. And what they have gone through in my eyes, people, I've healed myself. I had a breast tumor. What I experienced is that I had to heal that inner stirrings so I could calm that preciousness. And so what I call sin is really the preciousness of the internal stirriness of grace appearing and being able to recognize grace. Because when we stir the negative, when we stir the darking moments of our lives, the things that might have happened, or this, you know, whatever that is, we stir ourselves back to an idea that's caught in the neurological patterns. And it's only through reading a lot of theology and understanding a lot of the sacred holy wisdom, holy word, whether it's in the Quran, the Bible, Hindu traditions, Celtic traditions, Mayan traditions. I mean, they all touch us in this preciousness of holy wisdom, holy word. And that word of confidence, of inner stirrings, is always bringing us back to that. The imagination has retained the grace of innocence, John Donahue says. This is no naive, untested innocence. It knows well the shadows and the troughs of the world, but it believes that there is more, that there are secret worlds hidden within the simplest, clearest things. The imagination is not convinced by the world of external fact. It is not persuaded by situations that pretend to be finished or closed. The innocence of the imagination is willing to see new possibilities in what appears to be fixed and framed. There is a moreness to everything that can never be exhausted. The imagination retains a passion for freedom. There are no rules for the imagination. It never wants to stay trapped in the expected territories. It never wants to stay trapped in old maps because they don't satisfy. It wants to press ahead beyond the accepted frontiers and bring back reports of regions no map maker has ever visited. We set up these maps in our brain, it's like a mapping of neurological patterning. And most of it points towards the negative realm of what our life experience has come. So the imagination keeps the young heart. When the imagination is alive, the life remains youthful. There is often evident in a writer or an artist who is old in years but is still incredibly vital in soul and mind. Sometimes in old age, an artist can do her most creative work. It is quite fascinating to see how the inner harvest of years will not succumb to weariness or complacent predictability. We do succumb so often to that predictability of our lives. I had an experience on this island of Iona of curiosity. I'd heard about Iona. I had had a lot of vision. I had people tell me where I should visit on the island of Iona. Saint Columba, a Catholic that disappeared from, he kind of rode across and came onto the island of Iona from Ireland. He founded the tradition of this Celtic wisdom, this Celtic knots, the Celtic, like a lot of tradition, spiritual tradition came from these islands. And the Druids were there, the ancient Druids. The Druids were the people of the land. The Druids were the people of the traditions. And just like all old cultures of tradition, this holy wisdom, holy word stands in that. And this idea of tradition, sometimes we've thrown out the baby with the bathwater through political regimes, through dogma, through whatever, but all of our old cultures have this holy wisdom, holy word. And this idea that religion has caused damage is not so much damage as it is the individual of that stirring, not being imagination, not having the imagination awaken to that beauty, not having our imagination point towards a new mapping, and people that stay in the mapping of this undercurrent, that mapping doesn't stir us awake. The old traditions, the old cultures of our ancestors. When we think of Memorial Day this weekend, I hope you thank your ancestors. Memorial Day was a day when my mother always went to the graveyard, and it's like a deep tradition for me. The deep tradition of understanding how I stand in the witness of my mom. The witness of my mother was that her grandmother was not to be talked about because she was Indigenous. What was that? What is that? What brings us to our knees if we break through some of those old patterns and come back to this great grandmother for me, this invisible tradition of native tradition, earth cultured tradition. And then my ancestors from Scotland, the Cunningham family. This is a huge clan in Scotland. How did they get to Maine, where my dad was? How did they come to Canada? Why did they come? Were they refugees? Were they, coming against the plague of the potato, famine? So many traditions we don't know except our imagination can bring us to only the deep witness of trauma that our ancestors went through, the deep witness of ideas of how trauma hits us, how cultures hit us spiritually, emotionally, the integrity of, how their imagination to have a new life, to go to a new land. Anybody that's in asylum that has to travel to a new land just to feed their family is in the imagination of hope. And that imagination of hope brings us to our knees of grace. What is that imagination for us as we move into these witnesses of love and beauty? You know, what is it that makes us stir the beauty back into our lives? Stir the witness of beauty back into our lives when the tragic happens. So let's go a little further because I love where he's going. The imagination has a deep sense of irony. It is wide awake to the limitation of its own suggestions and showings. Because the imagination inhabits the province of possibility. Here's the word of Taqwa Ahmed, possibility. Positivity. Taqwa always is about positivity. What is the positive in your life? But the province of possibility, for positivity, it is well aware that the image it presents could indeed be otherwise the imagination that keeps this distinction open and thus enlarges the breathing room for the gifts it offers. The imagination creates the pathway of reverence for the visitations of beauty. Aren't we blessed when we can see a flower or when we can see hope? If you can see the hope of feeding the children of the world, of knowing that people don't have to be poor or starving, or that there's grace after death, that the imagination of the souls that die when we don't want them to die, or the imagination of addiction and children in addiction, parents in addiction, the deep stirrings of irony of what that brings us to gain the imagination back, to give us some sense of practice, a sense of practice within ourselves. He says to awaken the imagination is to retrieve, reclaim, and re-enter experience in fresh new ways. He says, as Bill Stafford writes, you are the only world expert on your own experience. You are the only world expert on your own experience. None of you, including myself, can learn anything except being our own inner expert. And our imagination brings that if we open to ourselves. He says there is no one else to illuminate our experience but ourselves. You are the only world expert. To put it in liturgical terms, each of us is a priest, priestess of our own life, and the altar of our imagination is the place where our hidden life can become visible and open to transfiguration. So when we talk about Pentecost and we talk about transfiguration and we talk about the witness of Christian traditions on this island of Iona, for me, and getting there at a time when the veil is quite open anyway, this is the time of year when the veil is open to us to bring and receive the Holy Spirit, to bring and receive the Holy Spirit within ourselves. This deep witness of love, this deep witness of practice, practicing our own imagination to see us well, to practice our own ability to see that the holy wisdom, maybe holy word, whatever we read, whatever tradition we are, whether it's the Quran, whether it's, the Celtic, whether it's the Hindu, whether it's Mayan, whether it's whatever it is, it's the holy wisdom, holy word within this imagination that can bring our own witness. This is very, very profound. There's the transfiguration of that spirit within you. Keats said it perfectly. I am certain of nothing but the holiness of the heart's affections and the truth of imagination. I am certain of nothing but the holiness of the heart's affections and the truth of imagination. Whether it existed before or not, for I have the same idea of all our passions or love. They are all in their sublime creative of the essential beauty. The call to the creative life is a call to dignity, to a life of vulnerability and adventure, and the call to a life that exquisite excitement and indeed ecstasy will often visit. The passion of the imagination is nourished from a deeper source called Eros, named Eros. The force of Eros keeps the thresholds of our lives vital, dangerous, and inviting. My professor, Jay Johnson, just gave a class, and I wanted to take it on Eros. And I'm excited to get the curriculum from him because I feel like, he's going to leave PSR and go and journey on to a next adventure. And his idea of Eros and understanding, I'm sure, is magical. But this idea of beauty, this idea that it's vital to have the deep threshold of imagination to bring us the vital forces, the vital part of ourselves, the vital heart of ourselves, to bring the witness of ourselves. This is powerfully blessed moments of love. A lot of people are messaging me, and that's good. So I want to just do this last little thing for you. I want to pull some angel cards, and later on I might do something with the Celtic tradition on a deeper level of these Celtic cards. I carry this book that is so cool. It's the Celtic Oracle, and it's divination of the Celtic, the trees, and what the trees bring. And on our green home today, I think we've got Lachlan or Joyce, somebody from 2020 or Bust is coming in about the 1 million trees. So join us at 11. I'll be back, not on some of these pages, but I'll be back on a couple of these pages. And we're going to have some really cool things. But let's pull a couple of angel cards right now and see what the day has to bring. I have this beautiful dish from my Native American tradition. My friend Julie, that was part of Kiraku, made these amazing dishes. I'm going to pull the cards out and let you see the whole dish. It's kind of messy because I haven't pulled it in a while, but she makes these beautiful dishes. I don't know if she's still making them, but I would assume, at least for me, the bear medicine is a very powerful one. And the cross there, this traditional native cross is just so holy. And it holds my angel cards, which are these amazing cards from Findhorn, the tradition of Findhorn. And when you pull an angel, you really pray. You really stand for your angel. And I highly recommend, if you can't get the cards or get a hold of the cards, I'm going to try to hold them on my website when I get my website up, because they've helped me a lot. I stay with the angel, and in Findhorn, they really, really take it serious. When you pull a card, you really stand for the angel, and you know that they're in your life. So I'm going to pull this for all of us, okay? This is our angel as a group conscious, whoever's watching. And I'm going to try to do this more often because I think it's really holy for all of us, because it can bring your imagination and it can bring my imagination, and we can keep an angel each week. Here I go. Oh, this is sweet. The angel of balance. Can you see her? She's the angel of balance. That's beautiful. I have a lot of imagination around this angel. Thank you. Angel of balance, please, we welcome you. We bless you. We thank you for coming into our lives. We know that you remind us of these amazing moments of time and the essence of time. We know that God is always directing us, or this great universe, or whatever we call God, is always bringing us into balance, no matter whether we like it or not. We welcome you to bring us and hold us into this day, this balance of day, whether we've had loved ones die, or people in harmony, or people understanding what do you really want from this beautiful presence of balance? What do we really hold in the presence of balance? What do we really host in the presence of balance? In the presence of light and love? Thank you. So I'm going to put this card back in my dish, but these are all the different, there's an angel of light. There's an angel of patience. So this week I'm going to hold that patience, that angel is the angel of forgiveness. So these are really precious. And we would take them serious as a group. And whatever card each person would pick, on the back is such a cute little angel, see? And whatever card a person would pick, you'd hold that person. So I want us all to hold that idea of balance and imagination. What is the imagination of balance for each of us? Now I'm going to pick these other angel cards because these are fun. These are all angel cards from a different source. I'm not sure where these cards came from, but I picked them up because I was really into angels. I was into angels in the clouds. And what I do is I've been shuffling them as we've been talking. And there's a whole group of cards. And my imagination will pick, I'll pick a card for all of us, but it's the imagination, it's the oracle of imagination. The angel of care. So it says, I am filled with joy as I care for people and things and all of nature. Loving care is the sole touch of light in everything we do, beyond consciousness of order and balance. When we care for all with which we have been entrusted, there is also an attraction of invisible helpers that begin to cooperate with the success of what we are creating. Well, I'm going to read it one more time because it's so deep around the same angel of balance, right? This fits. Oh my gosh, it's such lovely. I am filled with joy as I care for people and things and all of nature. Loving care is the sole touch of light in everything we do. Beyond consciousness of order and balance, when we care for all with which we have been entrusted, there is also an attraction of invisible helpers that begin to cooperate with the success of what we are creating. Beautiful. So I'm going to call the angel of care also for all of us. She's got this little, I'm going to try to hold her up. She's got a little table and she's caring for plants. And my neighbor went away and I got to care for her plants. And I'll go water them after my green show. But this is the preciousness. Look at her. She's caring for plants. And isn't that fit with Torch Seeds, what we've been working on? The angel of care. When you teach a child to plant a seed and care for that plant, they learn what the preciousness of the mystery of their own imagination of what it brings. So I just gave you a little bit of my love from graduation yesterday, the little bit of love from my ancestors because it's Memorial Day weekend, a little bit of love from the richness that I see. These two books came out of professors that I worked with in my degree, and they brought beauty into my life, and they brought the presence of God into my life. And they brought a lot more of holy wisdom, holy word into my life. And out of that comes this beautiful oracle. I just want to end with this morning. My Shingon practice for many years, I grabbed this. My Shingon practice was, I practiced for 10 years in Shingon tradition, and I still chant. But he gave me this beautiful sandalwood. And in this dish is still my sandalwood powder. I don't know if you can see it. Probably. Yeah, you can see it a little bit maybe. But this sandalwood powder is ancient. He said it's very, very old, ancient sandalwood powder. And I take a little bit of this powder and I put it in my palm, right? And then I rub it. And it has a really, really faint smell of sandalwood, but it's so holy. And I take care of the physical form very, very preciously when I remember. And I hope you remember to bring that balance into your life today of the holy wisdom, holy word. I hope you bring it into the presence of God and what your idea of holy is, what your idea of the preciousness of life is, whether it's watering a plant, whether it's your imagination of what is your hope for the planet. I don't know what it is, but bring your imagination to yourself today, because that's what brings beauty back for me. When I found that little sandalwood, which I must have gotten that 25 years ago, and I've put it on for 25 years, and yet it's still lasting. There's something like, how does it still last when I've been using it for all these years? But it has. It's a sacredness of my pathway. And you have the imagination within you to follow something precious to remind you of that beauty. So I gave you a couple of things what I remind myself of beauty. And I'm going to see you on the Green Show. I've got to go. Blessings. Have a beautiful day. I end this broadcast with deep love and deep compassion for you. The Green Show is coming on. We're going to have a beautiful group. We're going to have a beautiful presence of being with Marin friends. Today is our feng shui master. So I hope you come on. We'll be on at 11 o'clock. 20 minutes. We're going to talk about feng shui and the holiness of your home. And we have a really great feng shui master that grew up in the Chinese tradition. So she comes from the ancestry. So join me in 20 minutes. Blessings.